Hello and welcome to One Called Mama. I am your host, Sam, and I am so thankful that you have decided to join me today. I have a very special guest today. Her name is Amy Longmore. She has an incredible story to share. We met at the Behind Her Brand conference, and just really, she had a chance to kind of share with me what God has done in her life and about her daughter's story. And I thought this is a wonderful thing that we need to share on the show. So, Amy, I'm very glad you're here. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Yes. So tell me about Sierra. Well, tell me about yourself first, a little bit about yourself, and then let's jump into Sierra's story.
Sure. I am a mom of five. I've been married for 27 years
Wow.
and I have four grandchildren.
Wow.
And I think, there's a lot of people that walk through this life and are very comfortable in the world they live in. And I think when you have a very, very strong faith and you know that your goal is eternal life, that you are attacked more frequently,
Mhm.
spiritually attacked. And I think that has happened quite often to our family.
Yeah.
Um, on July 8th, 2020, our then 17-year-old twin daughter, Sierra, fell victim to a car crash and suffered a severe traumatic brain injury, among other injuries, including collapsed lungs and a midbrain stroke and several other injuries. So she was given, at first, we were told she wasn't going to survive. She was given about a 1% chance of survival based on all of her injuries. And
Wow.
the time she was actually airlifted to the hospital and without oxygen at the scene. So she really was not given much of a chance to survive. And so, as the story goes, about a week into her being induced into a medical coma, my husband and I were pulled into in a room by the pediatric doctors that were taking care of her
Mhm.
and told that we should call a priest for her last rites because she was not going to live through the night.
Wow.
And at that point, I was so emotionally distraught, I couldn't really speak. So my husband just looked at the team of doctors and said, "You do your job to the best of your ability, and we're leaving the rest to God." And we walked out of the room.
Yeah.
And we are a pretty faith-based family. We've raised our kids to know Jesus and make all their sacraments and attend church weekly and receive the sacraments. So they're pretty faith-based. Our whole family is. So from the moment this happens, we gathered together in prayer. And as time went on, we started praying very specific prayers for very specific
Mm.
things for God to do within Sierra and for our family. That night that we were told she wasn't going to live, I started a Facebook group called Miracle for Sierra, God's Heroes Unite. And it garnered not only thousands from the United States, but all around the world. And people
Wow.
started sharing stories and messaging me, complete strangers, just about what they had gone through and what resources are available. And they would pray with us online. And it was just, I'm getting goosebumps now because it was just so emotionally um, connected to other people that not only have gone through this, but haven't gone through this, but they just wanted to show their support in whichever way they could.
Yeah.
And that was just, it really is true when they say your character shines through in the worst of moments because people you think that maybe would have said their condolences and moved on were really with us for the entire journey that this has been. So we're very, very thankful for the prayer warriors that stood behind us. In the wee hours of the next day, a pediatric neurosurgeon, I'm sorry, he was a neurosurgeon on the adult floor, but he was assigned to pediatrics. And he overrode the doctor's decision to remove part of Sierra's skull in a life-saving surgery. And in the wee hours of the morning, they came in and took her down, and we signed waivers. And if you picture a cantaloupe cut in fours, she had a section a fourth of her skull right here just removed.
Oh, wow.
And it was to alleviate brain pressure. So that being said, she started to it started to look a little bit more positive in the respect that she was going to survive. But the doctors had told us, based on the damage that had been done to her brain, even if she survived, she would have no quality of life. She
Oh,
would
wow.
basically be in a vegetative state. We were actually planning to leave on a family vacation that day. So this was just, we all take it for granted. I've been there. My family's been there. I'm sure you've been there, where you just go about your daily life and you have plans for the future, whether it's a vacation or you're meeting someone for lunch or coffee or whatever it may be, and something disrupts your life in a heartbeat like this. I think before my daughter's accident, I really did not know much about brain injuries. I knew about concussions because my older kids played sports and things of that nature. But once you're thrust into a world like this, you learn really, really quick about the risks and the outcomes of people who have brain injuries such as Sierra's.
Yeah.
Um, After we were told she was going to survive, it was the next step was weaning her off of all the IV drugs that had kept her sedated to see, when she finally was off all of the IV medication, what would she move? Would she open her eyes? Like what would the outcome be?
Right.
Um, we grow up in a society where you show movies and you see movies of people in comas and all of a sudden they're awake and they're fine, and that's really not what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so as Sierra was weaned off the medication, she started to show very, very little signs. But insurance would only keep her in acute care for so long, and then she had to transfer to a rehabilitation hospital, which we really had to fight to get her in because she was still connected to a trach and feeding tubes, which they normally do not take patients.
Yeah.
So we fought really hard to get her into a rehabilitation hospital in Boston. It was called Spalding, and it's the #2 rehabilitation hospital in the world.
Oh,
And their
wow.
pediatric floor only had 12 beds. And upon admittance, Sierra just couldn't even move. She was still in a vegetative state. Her eyes were open, but she was not there.
Mhm.
Um, so her first couple of times at attending PT, they had to harness her out of the bed and put her in a chair and take her down to PT, and they'd put her on this tilt table. And they would start raising the tilt table, and all of a sudden her blood pressure would go up.
Mm.
So they'd say, okay, we'll try again tomorrow, and they'd put her down. And this happened for like 3 weeks. And I thought, boy, we're never getting out of here. I mean, if this is
Yeah.
like 3 weeks into it, she's not even responsive. So we started garnering prayers and praying specifically for next steps in the process, which would be let her conquer the tilt table, that she could stand upright, her blood pressure would remain fine. And that happens. And what we started doing is we started praying, like, as I said before, just very specific prayers for what we needed to happen next,
Mhm.
whether it was for her to become more awake and alert, or, for her she was wheelchair bound at the time. So having her walk or anything like that just wasn't even an option at this point.
Right.
Um, because her skull was removed, her progress. So what your brain does is it creates a calcified bone where the skull has been replaced, and it separates your fluid in your head. So it basically what happens is when the skull's put back in, the fluid reabsorbs and you have that neuroplasticity working as it should, and your brain's able to function, pretty much like a normal person would function. But what was happening is because her skull was removed, her progress of even being aware or being alert or reacting to snaps in her face, or somebody clapping by her ears, it just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
So as time went on, we were praying, as I said, for very specific things. She wore a helmet to protect her brain at all times, and it was a time of COVID, so we could not leave the hospital building at all. So we would basically, I could tell you, I probably wore the floor out as many laps as my husband and I would do, pushing Sierra around the top floor of Spalding, because we just couldn't leave. But little by little, she started responding to different therapies, whether it was OT or speech. She basically had to learn her whole life all over again from infancy up to 17.
Wow.
She had to learn every single step of, um, you know, things we take for granted, whether it's drinking through a straw or it's learning how to enunciate letters or counting. She had to learn all that all over again.
Mm.
Um, what had happened is my husband and I had the other children at home who were basically being taken care of by his parents at the time. So we started taking shifts going back home. So he would stay a few days, I would go back home, and then we would trade off. At one point, I came to the hospital and my husband was standing outside of the room, and I looked kind of perplexed and said, "What are you doing out here?" And he said, "Well, the doctors are in with her now." And the doctor came out running to us and he's like, "You're not going to believe this. We put a book in front of her and she's reading."
What?
So it was like she was in this state of not much was happening. And then these big surprise moments would come. And I don't know how else to, really talk about them other that they were gifts from God. Like God was with her that day this all happened, and he has just never left her side.
Oh,
Um, so as she started attending certain therapies at Spalding, she, was becoming more aware and learning more things. And in mid-September, we traveled back to the original hospital we were in to get her skull put back in. But about a week prior, one of the factors of, or one of the characteristics, I should say, of a traumatic brain injury is you go through a process called storming. And you go through a process where you just cannot control any muscles in your body. So Sierra had to be strapped down. She had to sleep in this enclosed netted bed. And if you saw how she was at night, just her legs strapped, her arms strapped. She had pads on her, just in case she did get out. She was in this netted bed. But at this one particular juncture, a week before her surgery, a nurse was in there cleaning her up, and she had taken her hand really quick and just ripped all the scabs off of where her skull was removed. So wound care was on top of it. We thought we had addressed it. So we take a 2.5 hour ambulance ride back to the original hospital. They have her skull put in. At this point, they had defrosted her skull for most of the day. And once that happens, if you don't use it, you may not be able to use it.
yeah.
Um, if you are from the medical or nursing field, just up until a couple of years ago, if a skull was removed from a person's head, they would put it in the abdomen so that it was still familiar with the body of that person. They've stopped that practice probably about 5 years ago. But we get to the hospital, and because the wound hadn't totally healed and it started scabbing over, the neurosurgeon just looked at my husband and I and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm not doing the surgery today." And I just fell to the floor. Not only did I know that that surgery and putting that back in might help her progress so that we really knew like what we were dealing with in terms of the brain injury, but just all that we had gone through, we were so deflated, so exhausted. We had gone through so much anguish to this point. I don't know another emotion I could even say for that moment in time. We drove 2.5 hours back without the surgery. Luckily, they were able to refreeze her skull for a later date. When we returned back to Spalding, Sierra had a full feed that day. She hadn't eaten in 24 hours. I wasn't a nurse, but I said, "I don't think that's going to go over well." And they had strapped her in, zipped the enclosure, and said their goodnights. And as soon as they walked out, she started choking on her vomit because it was just too much feed. So we were frantically code bluing her, getting everybody else in there to get her out of that net and get her released so she could sit up as quickly as possible. So on top of what had happened to her in the day, coming back and having that experience, I didn't know how much more fight was left in my husband and I, really. The next day, she had a new PT, physical therapist. We went down to the room. She was in a wheelchair, and my husband and I, again, totally just devastated. She looked at us that day and said, Sierra's going to walk today. And I don't know if we actually felt like that was um, rhetorical, or I think we were a little upset. Like, how can you say that? Um, but her name was Jen. She was a little spitfire. She was a wonderful, wonderful person. And she told my husband, "You hold the wheelchair, I'm getting her up." And that morning, Sierra took 6 assisted steps, and we just lost it. So, from going on, God just kept us on this journey from going on to these moments where, you are at the rock bottom and you just rise again to get that energy back and that hope that it's going to get better. Um, from that moment, my Lord, Sierra started using a walker. Before you knew it, she was walking with people just holding her arms, then holding her back. And before you knew it, she was taking small assisted steps or unassisted steps all by herself.
Oh my gosh.
Spalding's a wonderful facility. They have a lot of robotic machines there too that help, especially when your muscles have been damaged or atrophied during any type of injury. So she had been on those previously, but to see her take these steps when we were definitely told she's never going to walk or have any quality of life was just incredible. Sierra was transferred. I'm sorry, she came home October 6th, and October 7th, she started outpatient therapies at our local hospital here, both going here, and then she was a senior at high school at that time. So she started receiving some services through the Department of Education for OT, speech and physical therapy.
Wow.
Um, so in a nutshell, we've seen, these God just come in these moments of our journey when, He put the right person, whether that's medical or a religious person or a friend or a family member, right in our path and with the right message that you just can't say it's a coincidence because God did it, right?
Right.
And brought them into our life at the right time. And Sierra went on to be tutored. She had 2 classes to finish her senior year. She started tutoring with one of the teachers at the high school in November.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll step back just a few weeks before that, she had her skull successfully put back in.
Okay.
And her all her fluids reabsorbed and things were looking great. And right before Thanksgiving, um, I took her in for an appointment and they did another MRI and CAT scan of her brain. And the doctor was just overwhelmed with joy and I think very puzzled. She couldn't explain how Sierra's brain had healed in the capacity that it did. And we knew it was God. We knew all along it was God.
Yeah.
Um, Sierra knew it was God. So things just progressed from there. And I think Sierra, at that point, when she was becoming more aware, basically wanted to help people going through this journey because you are alone. I could be her caretaker. Her father was, she has siblings. Everybody was helpful and supportive, but we're not Sierra. We're not the ones with the
Mhm.
brain injury. And I know it's a very lonely road. So she vowed that she wants to help others and that her second goal was definitely to bring others back to God.
Wow.
So we decided that we would look for programs and services to help the brain injured community. And that led us to create an organization called Unmask the Invisible.
So from the moment of her accident to her being well again from her going back to school, being tutored? What was the time frame?
Her accident happened on July 8th of 2020, and she was back in school the second week of November 2020.
That quickly?
That quickly.
Oh my.
That quickly. Yes.
Okay. I was thinking y'all had like a year. This was like a whole, like a at least a year. That, oh my goodness, that's what? That's what, 6 months? 5 months?
Not even. And 10 months to the day of her crash. And this is really, I'll tell you a little bit more in a second, but 10 months to the day of her crash, one of the things she loved, she was always a three-sport athlete. All my children are three-sport athletes. And she loved softball. She wanted to play her varsity year. And even though she didn't quite have the agility and the mobility that she had prior to the crash, she had a great group of coaches that worked with her. Her dad was like her biggest coach. He worked with her all the time. And 10 months to the day, she took a base plate and hit a ball and ran as best as she could to first base. And there was not a dry eye in that space.
Oh
It
my
was pretty
gosh.
incredible.
Wow. Okay. So this whole story is incredible. So she has this new calling, right? So she has this calling out of this tragedy, out of this whole event. Now she has this new calling and purpose on her life. And so you say, okay, we're gonna figure out how to bring this full circle for you. We're gonna figure out how to make this happen. So you create the organization. It's a nonprofit called Unmasking the Invisible, correct?
Unmask the invisible.
Unmask the Invisible. Sorry.
Yeah.
So tell me about this organization. What do y'all do? How did you start it? I mean, I know it's based on Sierra's story,
Yeah.
but walk us through that process.
Sure. Well, I just want to take a step back because I think, like yourself, you were just surprised because you thought maybe a year had
Mhm.
passed, and I'm
Yeah.
talking about a different year. Um, One of the things that is we also wrote a book, which I'll talk about in a second, but
Yes.
one of the things that Sierra experienced in her coma was a near-death experience. So and it details it in the book, but she had seen my mom who had passed away several years earlier,
Mm.
and she had and again, it details it in the book, but she had met Saint Padre Pio. And there's a very interesting story in the book about how I became aware, even though I'm Catholic my entire life, I was not as familiar with Saint Padre Pio as I certainly am today. But she met him and she also met Jesus. And she details that in the book of what happened in her near-death experience. So coming out of all of this and saying she wants to bring people back to God, she especially wants to bring people who don't believe or whose faith has been shaken by someone who maybe, whether it was a parent or religious figure or whoever made them doubt their faith in the first place. Those are the people too she absolutely wants to bring back to God.
Mm.
So one of the first activities that Sierra did when she was at Spalding, because she couldn't talk very well because of the trach and her voice had been out of commission for so long, was art.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
they had this big poster board, and she would take these different colors of paint and just kind of throw it on there wherever it fell. And I seen such joy come from her in doing art projects. And then I also learned that art brings 10% more blood and oxygen to your brain. Beautiful art brings it to the cognitive part of your brain. Ugly art, like some people are just drawn to watching horror movies, right? So
Yeah.
that brings blood and oxygen to your brain that actually affects the mobility, like your physical mobility. So there's so much I've learned about this. It's
Fascinating.
incredible. So we started a project called the Sierra Project. That was one of our very first intentions with this organization. And under the Sierra Project, we have a Pay It Forward program. So you can go on our website, you can request an art kit, and inside this art kit, there's canvas, watercolors, sketch pads, there's free gifts in there, there's brochures, and basically what we ask you to do is We send it to anybody that requests it. So if you're a survivor, a caregiver, a provider, a relative, a community member that supports somebody with a brain injury, we ask that you request the kit. And once you're done with your masterpiece, you go onto our website and upload it to our art gallery.
Mhm.
It gives a voice to people who may not have a voice because they can no longer speak, or they're wheelchair bound, or wherever they're at in their journey. We want to meet them right there, but we
Right.
want them to have a voice. So that's one of our projects. The other project is we do what's called This Is Your Brain on Art. So we have in-person art classes led by an art instructor. And let me tell you, these paintings are just gorgeous. And I do not have a creative bone in my body. So when I see these, I get very intimidated, like I bet a lot of people do. But she's so graceful in the way that she leads the classes that you walk out of there, no matter what your ability or your mobility is, you walk out of there with a beautiful art piece. And you can see some of that in our Facebook group as well as on our website. So we hold those. Locally, we are now expanding to nationwide, asking other art studios to join in and supporting us in this mission to bring brain injury awareness and brain injury survivors and their loved ones and community members together to support this. And our last project right now under the Sierra Project is we started working almost about a year and a half ago we are demographically close to Dartmouth College.
Mhm.
So there's a Thayer School of Engineering at Dartmouth College, and we started working on the development of a weighted paintbrush, which we're going to take to patent. So if
Very
you look on
exciting.
Amazon and you're looking for a weighted pen or pencil, you can find it, but there's no such thing as a weighted paintbrush. And what we found is with brain injury survivors, certain parts of your brain can cause ataxia, which is the shakiness, or some people have like just, they just don't have the mobility or the gripping that they used to before their brain injury. So this weighted paintbrush is weighted. We've tested it with brain injury survivors. It's weighted accordingly. It has sensors on the outside of it so that it can, let the brain know, exactly what it's doing and help the brush stay weighted down to actually paint. So that's a really exciting project that we're working
Very
on.
cool.
So we started with art, but we quickly moved into spiritual encouragement.
Mhm.
We have the Hope Cafe, which when I was first coming out of this experience with Sierra and starting her journey of healing, we looked all over for support groups. And what we really found is that the majority of the support groups are for caregivers and
Mhm.
the survivor itself. So we wanted to create a group that was all inclusive. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're just somebody that wants to learn about a brain injury and what survivors are going through, or you're just looking for resources. But we open it up to anybody, whether you're a survivor, caregiver, community member, teacher, whoever you are.
Yeah.
We also have a page on our website that has spiritual encouragement from different pneumas. I don't know if you're familiar with what a pneuma is,
No.
but a pneuma, different songs that help traumatic brain injury, different melodies. We also have poetry and different prayers on there. And they're not based on a particular religion. They're based on, just centering yourself in that spiritual moment and meeting people where they're at. We also have a Halo Fund. So what we found is when we were looking for resources to help Sierra recover both invasive and non-invasive resources, I had to go to so many different places. So if I was interested in hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I would have to go specifically to that site of people who actually did that for different reasons. Or if I was looking at biomagnetism, that was a different site. So what we did on our website is we brought all these resources together. So
Mhm.
you can look on our resource website, and I'm sorry, the resource part, and there's over 30 resources on there that are mostly non-invasive. But what we found is that they're not covered by medical insurance. And the out-of-pocket expense can be quite hefty.
Right.
So we created this Halo Fund that we raise funds through different fundraisers and donations, and we financially support survivors and families to not only try some of these therapies if they wish, but also to pay for some adaptive equipment that's not covered under insurance, or to help them pay some of their medical bills because the copays are really high or whatever may have you. So we also have that. We're currently in our 5-year strategic plan and planning to do in-person retreats, which we're so looking forward to bringing, making those lifelong connections. And we were fortunate enough to, Sierra and I were fortunate enough to go to a retreat with another organization and just to see, the survivors come together and share a commonality with each other was just incredible. The energy was just incredible. So we're really looking forward to that. We also have respite care that we work with community nursing programs so that if there is a traumatic brain injury survivor among their patients that they take care of, we can help pay for their training or likewise provide respite for that person. So there's a lot of different programs that we're working on. We're only 2 years old and we have done, I think we've done, I'm very proud of the work we have done. We're growing, we're helping people, and we're giving back. And that's really what Sierra's wish was, and we're making that come true. We have an incredible group of board members that support our mission and support Sierra. And I couldn't ask for a better group of people to work with and, volunteers and so forth.
That is amazing. You're only 2 years old as a nonprofit.
Yes.
That's incredible what y'all have set up in such a short amount of time. I mean, I know that for setting up a nonprofit, it can be very daunting. There's a lot of work involved just on the back end, getting everything together. And then just all of the resources. When I was on your website, I was really that was one of the things that stood out to me was all the resources that you had pulled because you did all the legwork
Yes.
for other people. And I saw that in what your site offered. And then the Hope Cafe, the Halo Fund, the book that Sierra and you and one other lady wrote. I don't have her name off the top of my head.
Yes, Bridget. May
Bridget.
Lewis. Yeah.
The book y'all wrote, just so much in such a short amount of time. Not only that, but then dealing with you have 5 kids, you have a marriage,
Yeah.
you have your own
Yeah.
life. That's pretty incredible. That's
Thank you.
wonderful. So what is on, I know there are some things that are on the horizon for the organization. What for, if this is an okay question to ask, what for Sierra, what is next for her? Like I'm so interested. She's how old is she now?
She's 22.
22. Does she have, I mean, is she still going to college? Like what is she in the midst of right now?
So once she graduated high school, she did enroll in fall classes and she was working on her certificate for early childhood education. So she's continuing to do that path. However, it's very daunting, right? You have a brain injury. With Sierra, well, let me just say with brain injuries, one of the things that I have seen in interviews with other people as well is whatever characteristics or traits you had prior to the crash, they almost exasperate after the crash.
Mm.
So Sierra was a very introverted person. So after the crash, she's even extra introverted, but she's getting out there. She's actually in a few weeks going to be on a survivor panel for the Brain Injury Association of New Hampshire and Vermont.
Wow.
So we're really excited about that. She definitely wrote some of the chapters in the book, which was really great. She went back to driving. She just bought a brand new vehicle all on her own. So
Oh,
very happy with that. And she does work at a local retail shop here in where we live in the Upper Valley. Sierra, I think, she's very involved in the organization. I think she probably wants to stay that course and meet more survivors and just help them navigate. One of the things that was really important to us too, that I searched far and wide for in the United States was some type of support for her siblings because she is
mm,
one of 5, but she's also a twin. And her twin really took, I mean, this impacted all of us to grave depths, but her twin definitely took some impact that we're all still kind of struggling with, but she's especially struggling with. And what I found is that there really was not a lot of support groups or any support for siblings. So I connected with Dr. Charles Denegraff out of San Diego State, who co-wrote a thesis with a psychopsychologist who lived in London. So I worked with the two of them, and they had done all the legwork in terms of interviewing all these, like younger to adult to older siblings of brain injury survivors. And what they actually found that was very common is that there's this sense of loss of identity. So these
Oh.
siblings become whoever their survivor is in their family, they become their sister or their brother. And I saw that in our family too. So even our youngest at the time was 12, and he almost became Sierra's brother, kind of lost his identity in the process. And what's also important is that in the research is that the acknowledgement for these, just to be acknowledged that, hey, you're going through this trauma. Hey, we know the amount of pressure and responsibility that now has been placed on you is so important. And they really have no outlet to talk about it. And I saw that with my own children too. Like my husband and I were immersed in this. Their grandparents, their uncles, everybody's immersed in what's going on with Sierra. So we're probably not the best sounding walls at that moment. And what I found is that we would like to create a program too where we have volunteers just check in on these siblings just to make sure whether they're school age, that they have transportation, meals, they're doing homework, they're keeping up. Do you want to just chat? Or they're adults. Like, how did you feel about it? It might have happened 15 years ago, but really work on a program where we're bringing light and exposure to these siblings,
Yeah.
because I think that's so important and they kind of get lost along the way. And then if you're an older sibling too, and the parents may be older, that responsibility becomes yours. Like if the parents pass on, that responsibility is now yours to take care of your sibling who's a brain injury survivor.
Mhm.
So there's a lot tangled up into the sibling support groups that
Yeah.
we're hoping to have and that, but I know that was getting off on a tangent, but I felt that
No.
was super important to talk about as well. That's very near and dear to our heart.
No,
But
that.
Sierra is really, if you didn't know Sierra and you just met her on the street, you would never believe the book and you would never believe the story I'm telling you. And I truly believe I can remember the most dawning moment for me in this entire journey was the night we were told she wasn't going to live through the night. And
Mhm.
there happened to be a little chapel in the church, or I'm sorry, in the hospital we were at. And I remember going there in the wee hours of the morning. And instead of sitting in the pew, kneeling right at the altar and looking, there was a beautiful stained glass window there. It was a rainy night. I'll never forget it. I didn't want to, but I started praying to God in a way I never had prayed before,
Mhm.
in the respect that our children were gifts from God and that He knew them long before they were ours. And to sit there and say to God, if I love Sierra with all my heart, and I'd never be the same again. But if it's your will to take her, then your will be done. And those were by far the hardest words I will ever utter in my entire life. Um, and I feel like God knew I was being transparent. God knew I was pouring my heart out. And he heard our prayers and he saved her. So she's doing incredible things. She actually, one of our big fundraisers is a softball tournament up here locally, and she actually plays on one of the teams. So it's just incredible. And we've had people at the softball tournament tell us that, we normally come to these events in memory of someone. So
Mhm.
to come and see the survivor actually play is just incredible.
Mhm.
So that's one of our fundraisers that we do as well.
That's
But she's
amazing.
very much involved in the organization.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, before we wrap up for the day, you've written a book. It's
Yes.
Unmask the Invisible,
Yes.
and that can be found.
On Amazon.
Okay,
Yep.
Amazon.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then if anyone wanted to get in touch with you or the organization, where would they go?
They can go right to www.unmasktheinvisible.org and go to the About page, and all of our profiles are right there.
Awesome. And then you also said you'll have a Facebook community, or is that a private community? Is that
Nope, that's open to the public. It's
okay?
Unmask the Invisible as
Okay.
well. And then we still, almost 5 years later, have thousands of followers on Miracle for Sierra, God's Heroes Unite.
Oh, is that
And
still
the
active?
public, that's, yes, it is. Yep.
Good. Okay, awesome. This has been incredible. Wow. I never get tired of hearing how God performs miracles, how he shows up, how he changes people's lives. Thank you so much for sharing her story, for sharing your story with us. I know this is going to impact a lot of people.
And thank you. I can't thank you enough, Sam. It was so great meeting you and chatting with you. And then to have the opportunity to come and have you share our story with the rest of the world is just amazing. So I truly appreciate it. Sierra, my husband, we all truly appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure. This is just the beginning of our relationship, so I am excited to learn about y'all more and have more stuff like this happen. So,
Awesome.
yes. Well, thank you so much, Amy. Thank you, everyone who listened in today. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions for future episodes, feel free to email me at onecalledmama@gmail.com. Y'all have a great week, and we'll be in touch soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.